I didn't lose myself all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you. Nobody warns you that disappearing is a gradual thing. That one day you're a full, complicated, laughing woman with opinions about music and bad habits and a favorite corner booth at your local diner. And then slowly, quietly, over months and years, you become a supporting character in someone else's life. You become the one who adjusts, the one who shrinks, the one who says whatever you want so many times that eventually you forget what you actually want at all. My name is Renata. I'm 41 years old. I live in Chicago. And for 6 years of my life, I was in love with a woman who never fully chose me. And I stayed anyway, convinced that loving her harder would eventually make her see that I was worth choosing. It didn't work that way. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Not with her, but with the version of me that existed before her. Because I think that version deserves to be acknowledged before we go any further. I grew up in a Mexican-American household on the southwest side of Chicago. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knows your grandmother's name, and the smell of someone's cooking can stop you mid-step on the sidewalk. My mother was a seamstress. My father drove a delivery truck. They were good people, tired people, who loved their children in the only language they knew, which was sacrifice and silence and showing up. Queerness wasn't a word in our house. It wasn't a concept anyone had equipped us to hold. I didn't grow up hearing slurs necessarily, but I grew up in a silence that was just as loud. The kind of silence that tells you certain things are simply not possible for people like you in a life like this. I knew I was different from the time I was maybe 11 or 12. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way I had words for. Just in the way that when the other girls at school talked about boys, I would nod along and feel like I was participating in a conversation being held in a language I hadn't quite learned. I understood the grammar. I just didn't feel the meaning. It wasn't until I was 23, living in a tiny apartment in Pilsen with 2 roommates and working as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit, that I fell in love for the first time. Her name was Cass. She was a photographer. She had paint-stained jeans and a laugh that filled rooms, and this way of looking at you like you were the most interesting thing she'd ever seen. She looked at me like that, and I, who had spent 23 years not fully understanding what I was, I understood it immediately when Cass looked at me, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. We were together for 8 months. They were 8 of the most disorienting, electric, beautiful months of my life. I was figuring out my identity while simultaneously being in a relationship, which is, and I say this gently, a lot. It's a lot to carry at once. Falling in love, and also finally understanding the shape of who you are. Holding both those things at the same time while also going to work and calling your mother on Sundays and pretending nothing seismic is happening inside you. Cass and I ended because we were both too young and too unsteady, and we wanted different things from life. Not because we didn't care about each other. That ending was clean, in its own way. Sad, but clean. We cried. We hugged. We let each other go. I didn't know, standing there at 23, that the next time I fell in love, it would not be clean at all. Her name was Deja. I met her when I was 30, at a community art event in Logan Square. She was charismatic in a way that was almost overwhelming, the kind of person who commands a room without trying, who makes everyone around them feel both seen and slightly off balance. She had natural hair she wore in a big, beautiful crown, and she dressed like someone who had put genuine thought into every choice but made it look effortless. She was funny and sharp, and she quoted writers I hadn't read and introduced me to music I'd been missing my whole life. She was also, I would come to understand slowly, someone who was terrified of being fully claimed by anyone. We were never officially together, and that was the cruelest part. We existed in this space she defined as not labels, just us, which sounded beautifully free when she said it, and which I later understood was a way of keeping the door open, always, for her own departure. If we were never officially together, she could never officially leave. If I was never officially her girlfriend, I could never officially be devastated when she turned to someone else. But I was devastated. Every time. Here's what 6 years of that looked like from the inside. It looked like rearranging my schedule around hers without being asked. It looked like being the person she called at 2 a.m. when she was anxious or scared, and then not hearing from her for 4 days. It looked like attending her gallery openings and standing slightly to the side, not introduced as anything in particular, watching her work the room, feeling proud of her, and invisible at the same time. It looked like celebrating her wins louder than she celebrated mine. It looked like making myself smaller in conversations so she could feel bigger. It looked like saying, "I'm fine," when I wasn't, because I had learned, slowly, without realizing, that my not fineness made her uncomfortable and created distance. And distance was the thing I feared most. It looked like being the most reliable, most devoted, most self-erasing version of myself I had ever been, and still not being enough. I want to be clear about something because I've done a lot of work to understand this. Deja was not a villain. She was a person with her own wounds, her own fears, her own complicated relationship with intimacy and commitment. She didn't set out to harm me. She probably didn't fully understand what she was doing. I've forgiven her. Genuinely. Not in the teeth-gritted way, but in the released way. Because holding on to the anger was heavier than letting it go. But the impact of what happened between us was real, regardless of her intentions. By the time it ended, and it ended badly, with me finally saying the things I'd swallowed for years, and her looking at me with something like relief that it was finally over. I was someone I barely recognized. I had no idea what music I liked anymore. I had stopped calling my friends as regularly because so much of my social energy had gone into managing the chaos of that relationship. I had gained and lost weight from stress without paying attention. I had stopped writing. I used to write, journal, little essays about things I noticed. Nothing serious, just mine. And I hadn't written a single thing in almost 2 years. I looked in the mirror, and I could see my face and I knew it was me. But the person looking back felt like someone I had lost the address of. Are you still with me? If you are, if this is landing somewhere in your chest, I want you to know that this channel, this space, this particular corner of the internet is for you. If you've ever loved someone and made yourself smaller to do it, if you've ever come out the other side of a relationship feeling like you left something essential behind, you belong here. If this story is already touching something real for you, consider subscribing. This is a safe space. We don't judge here. We just tell the truth and hold each other through it. And wherever you're listening from right now, I genuinely want to know, what city are you in? Drop it in the comments. There's something about knowing we're scattered all over, and still somehow in the same conversation that makes this feel less lonely. After Deja, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped. I didn't date. I didn't look. I didn't download any apps or let well-meaning friends set me up with anyone. I just stopped. And in that stopping, I started the uncomfortable work of figuring out who I actually was, underneath all the accommodating and adjusting and shrinking. It was not fun. I want to be honest about that. Healing is not a montage. It's not a walk in the park with good lighting and a realization. It's sitting with the discomfort of your own company when you've spent years avoiding it. It's noticing patterns in yourself that you'd rather not claim. It's being bored and sad and okay and bored and sad again, cycling through those states without resolution, trusting that something is shifting even when you can't feel it. I started therapy. My therapist's name is Dr. Anaya Webb. She's a Black woman in her 50s, incredibly direct, and she does not let me get away with anything. In our first session, she asked me to describe my relationship with Deja, and when I was done, she looked at me and said, "So you were the only one who showed up. And you called that love." I cried for about 15 minutes. Then I made another appointment. I also, after a long time of not doing it, started writing again. Just small things, observations, conversations I'd had, moments I wanted to remember. I didn't show anyone. It was just for me. But the act of putting words to my experience, of naming things, started doing something to me, like it was assembling pieces back into a shape. I started cooking again. Real cooking, not just functional eating. I called friends I had neglected. I redecorated my apartment, moved the furniture, got a new plant, threw away 3 things for every 1 thing I kept. I started going back to my favorite diner, not because I was meeting anyone there, but because I wanted to sit in my corner booth and read and eat eggs and belong to myself for an hour. I was 38 years old, sitting alone in a diner, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was actually there. That was the year before I met Soleil. I should describe my life at that point, practically speaking, so you understand the context. I had left the nonprofit world and was now working as a program coordinator for a community arts organization on the North Side, the kind of job where no day looks exactly like the last, where you're simultaneously managing spreadsheets and mopping up after a water leak in the gallery and talking a first-time exhibiting artist through a panic attack backstage. I loved it. It was chaotic and meaningful, and it asked me to be fully present, which is, I had learned, exactly what I needed. I had a small but solid friend group. My closest friend was a woman named Bryn, white, mid-40s, criminally funny, a middle school English teacher, who had the particular energy of someone who had given up on caring what anyone thought and found it deeply liberating. Bryn had been in my corner through the Deja years, even when I pushed her away. She never said, "I told you so." She just made me coffee and sat with me through the hard parts, and that's the kind of friendship that survives everything. I also had Marcus, who I'd known since college, queer, black, early 40s, a social worker who had the emotional intelligence of someone who had done a tremendous amount of his own work. Marcus was the first person who'd said very gently, during the Deja years, "Renata, I need you to notice what this is costing you." I hadn't been ready to hear it then. I heard it later. My life was not empty. It was not small. I had a community, a purpose, a home I liked coming back to, a cat named Billy who had strong opinions about everything. What I didn't have was, and I say this without catastrophizing, someone to be tender with, someone to build something with, not desperately, not as a missing piece without which nothing worked. Just that quiet, background awareness that something was available in you that wasn't currently being expressed. I wasn't looking. I was just open, which is different. It started with a broken printer, I know. Not exactly the opening line of a great love story. But that's how it happened, so that's what I'll give you. Our organization shared a building with 2 other nonprofits, a legal aid group and a small music education program called Northside Notes. The building was old and beautiful and falling apart in charming ways, and we all shared a supply closet and a single industrial printer that had the temperament of a toddler who hadn't napped. I was standing in the hallway outside the supply closet, on the phone with a vendor, increasingly frustrated, when the printer made a sound that could only be described as giving up. Just a long, mechanical groan, followed by silence. I hung up the phone, opened the supply closet, and found a woman already crouched in front of the printer with the front panel open, headphones around her neck, expression focused. She looked up at me. "I think it's the roller," she said, instead of hello. "I've fixed this before. Give me 10 minutes. She was, I would later learn, 44 years old. Her name was Soleil Beaumont. She was Haitian American, had grown up in Miami, had been in Chicago for about 6 years. She ran the music education program upstairs. She was wearing jeans and a soft gray cardigan and reading glasses she'd pushed up onto her forehead, and she had this quality of absolute calm in her manner that I noticed immediately. Not stillness, exactly. More like groundedness. Like someone who knew where she stood and didn't need to announce it. She fixed the printer in 11 minutes. I was watching the whole time, which she seemed not to mind. When she stood up and closed the panel, she said, "It'll hold for a few weeks. After that, they really need to replace it." "I'll pass that along," I said. "I'm Renata. I run programming for Open Frame, the arts org on the 2nd floor, Soleil. Music education, 3rd floor." She pulled her headphones the rest of the way off and looped them around her shoulder. "I've seen you in the building. You walk fast. I have a lot of meetings. Is that something to be proud of?" I laughed. An actual surprise laugh, the kind that comes out before you've decided to let it. "I genuinely don't know," she smiled. It was a smile that suggested she found the world quietly amusing, without being cynical about it. "I'll see you around, Renata, with a lot of meetings." She went back upstairs. I went back to my office, and I sat at my desk for a moment longer than necessary, aware that something had shifted very slightly, like a picture frame that had been hanging crooked for years, that someone had just gently straightened. We ran into each other in that building a dozen more times over the following month. Hallway exchanges, the shared kitchen where we both made terrible coffee at 8 a.m., One building-wide meeting about the landlord's proposed rent increase, where Soleil was the clearest and calmest voice in the room, laying out the relevant information, acknowledging the emotions in the space, suggesting a practical course of action, doing it all without raising her voice or overpowering anyone. I noticed her the way you notice someone who occupies space differently than you expect. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just was, fully, without apology and without performance. We started eating lunch at roughly the same time, which led to sitting near each other in the small courtyard behind the building on warm days, which led to actual conversation. Not small talk. She seemed to have a limited tolerance for small talk, and I found that refreshing. She asked real questions. She listened to the answers in a way that made you feel like she was actually processing them, rather than just waiting for her turn to speak. She asked me one afternoon what had brought me to arts administration. I told her the honest version, that I'd spent my 20s doing good work at a nonprofit that was important but didn't feel like mine, and that I'd had a period in my early 30s where I'd lost track of what I actually cared about, and that arts programming had been the thing that pulled me back. Because art, real art, community art, not the sanitized gallery version, was about people finding language for things they couldn't otherwise say. She was quiet for a moment after I said that. Then, "That sounds like you came to it for the same reason people make it. What do you mean?" "Music gives people language. You just said that. People who work in it usually know because they needed it first, before they could give it." I didn't answer right away, because she was right, and I wasn't sure I'd ever said it that clearly to myself. "What about you?" I asked. She smiled at her lunch. Same answer, different instrument. "I want to be honest with you about something." I wasn't falling in love with Soleil in those early weeks. I was doing something different. I was being interested. I was being curious, which sounds smaller, but in that season of my life, after years of a relationship where I had bent myself to fit someone else's shape, being genuinely curious about another person felt significant. It felt like evidence that something in me was still working. I wasn't analyzing what I felt or trying to name it. I was just letting it be what it was. Which was, I like talking to this woman. She makes me think. She seems like someone with a lot of interior life, who doesn't need to dump it on you all at once. She seems safe. Safe was not a word I had associated with attraction before. Safe sounds like a consolation prize. But I had learned, the hard way, through years of choosing intensity over steadiness, that safe was not small. Safe was, actually, enormously rare. I wasn't rushing. I was just present. And being present with another person, without expectation, without strategy, without the low-grade anxiety of trying to become what they needed, that was new. And it was quiet. And it was good. The shift happened on a Thursday evening in late September. We'd both stayed late. I was managing a last-minute crisis with one of our exhibiting artists. She had a student recital that ran long. We ended up in the kitchen at nearly 8 p.m., the building mostly empty, the city sounds coming through the window, both of us slightly wrung out from our respective days. She was making tea. I was stress-eating crackers from the cupboard. And she looked at me and said, "You okay?" And I said reflexively, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she said, very quietly, without pressure, "You don't have to be fine with me." I stopped eating my crackers. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no swelling music. She didn't say it as a big declaration. She said it the way someone hands you something. "Here, take this. You don't have to carry it alone." Casual, easy, like she wasn't even sure it would land. It landed. I put down the crackers, and I said, and I surprised myself saying it, "I'm actually a little exhausted, not from today, just from a long time of certain things." She nodded. She poured her tea. She sat down at the kitchen table and said, "Do you want to talk about it?" And I said, "Not all of it. Not tonight." And she said, "Okay, we can just sit here then." So we did. We sat in that kitchen for almost an hour. We talked about small things and comfortable things, and we let the silences be what they were. Not awkward, not filled, just there. And at some point, I realized that I hadn't felt this relaxed in the company of another person in a very long time. When I got home that night, I sat on my couch with Billy in my lap, and I said out loud to my cat, because that is the kind of relationship we have, I think something is happening. Billy gave me a look that suggested she had known for some time. Are you still listening? I hope you are. Because I know this part, the middle part, before things become clear, can feel slow. But this is actually the part that matters most. This is the part where healing happens. Not in revelations, but in small accumulated moments of being safe with someone. That's what I want you to see. That's what I want you to recognize. If you've been through something hard, and you're wondering what being okay looks like on the other side, it looks like Thursday evenings in a kitchen with a cup of tea and someone who doesn't need you to be fine. If you're resonating with any of this, please hit subscribe, leave a comment, tell me where you are, what this brought up for you. We're building something here, and it only works if you're in it with us. And I really do want to know, what city are you in right now? Tell me in the comments. Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, London, São Paulo. Wherever you are, you're not alone in this. Over the following weeks, Soleil and I began spending more time together intentionally, rather than incidentally. We'd walk to a nearby cafe after work on Fridays. We found a restaurant halfway between our neighborhoods that we both loved, a small Haitian place run by a woman named Claudette, who seemed to know Soleil's order by heart, and who extended that familiarity to me with remarkable speed. We talked about our work and our families and our histories, not all at once. In pieces, the way you hand someone things you've been carrying when you start to trust they won't drop them. She told me about growing up in Miami in a Haitian-American household that was big and warm and complicated and loving. She told me about her musical training, classical piano, then jazz, then the realization in her late 20s that what she actually wanted to do was teach, because teaching was where she found the most joy. She told me about a long-term relationship that had ended in her late 30s. She said it with a kind of steady acceptance that told me she'd done the processing and arrived somewhere integrated. She didn't ask me for my full history. She waited until I offered it, which I did gradually, in pieces. I told her about my childhood, my coming out, Cass, the long years of Deja. I told her what it had cost me. I told her about the version of myself I'd lost and was slowly finding again. She listened to all of it without flinching and without rushing to reassure me. That last part mattered. I had told parts of this story to other people who were so uncomfortable with my pain that they'd immediately tried to resolve it. But you're so strong. You're so much better off. You should be proud of how far you've come. All of which came from kindness, but which also, in their urgency to make the pain smaller, made me feel like I couldn't actually have it. Soleil didn't do that. She let me have it. She sat with me in it. And then, when I was done, she said, "It makes sense that you're careful now. It makes sense that you're rebuilding slowly. That's not a weakness. That's evidence that you know what things are worth." I looked at her. "You're very specific when you talk," I said. "Like every word is actually the word you mean." She considered that. "I've had to learn to say what I actually mean. It took a while." "What did it take?" She smiled. "Ending a relationship where I was saying everything but meaning nothing. There was a night in November, cold, properly cold, the kind of Chicago cold that reminds you it's serious, when we were walking back from Claudette's restaurant, and I slipped on an icy patch on the sidewalk. I didn't fall. Soleil caught me, one hand on my arm, instantly, reflexively. We stopped. She held on for a moment longer than she needed to, and then released me slowly, making sure I had my footing. "Thank you," I said. "Of course," she said. We kept walking. Neither of us mentioned it, but something had been acknowledged silently in that fraction of a moment, a willingness to catch and be caught, a gentleness in how the hold was released. I turned it over in my mind the whole walk to the train. I had spent 6 years with a woman who, every time I slipped, would take a small step back, and here was someone who moved toward me without thinking. I filed that away. I didn't say anything. I wasn't ready to say anything, but I filed it away, and I let it mean what it meant. I kissed her first, or rather, we moved toward each other at the same moment, and since I'm the one telling the story, I'll say I kissed her first. It happened in my apartment, a Sunday afternoon in January, the radiator making its complicated noises, Billy asleep on the windowsill. both of us having spent 3 hours going through a box of old records I'd found while reorganizing my closet. We'd been playing them. Soleil had a lot of opinions about records. Excellent opinions. And at some point we'd stopped talking about the music, and we were just sitting close on the floor, leaning against the couch, and she was looking at a record sleeve and I was looking at her profile, and I thought, I don't want to not do this. Not I want this. More like, I don't want to look back and have not chosen this. After 6 years of waiting to be chosen, I chose. She turned to look at me and we were very close, and I said quietly, I want to tell you something, okay? She said. I think I've been falling for you since you fixed the printer. She was quiet for a moment, and then, and this is the part that undoes me even now, when I think about it, she said, I know. I've been trying to give you time to find it yourself. I laughed. She laughed. And then I kissed her, and she kissed me back, and Billy continued sleeping, unbothered, as if this was simply the conclusion of a process she had been waiting on for some time. I need to stop here and tell you something. Because this is the part where some stories would shift, where the falling in love part would swoop in and solve everything, where the new relationship would undo all the old damage, where the right person would be the cure. That is not what happened, and I think it's important that I tell you that clearly, because if you're out there waiting for someone to come along and heal you, I want to gently offer you a different frame. Soleil didn't heal me. I had done most of that work before I met her. She showed up into a version of me that was already rebuilding. She walked into a space I had already started clearing, and what she contributed was not rescue. It was accompaniment. She came alongside someone who was already in motion, and moved with me. That distinction matters enormously, and I didn't understand it until I lived it. In my relationship with Deja, I had been waiting, constantly, for something from her that would make me feel okay. Some acknowledgement, some choice, some gesture of being fully seen. My okayness had been contingent on her actions, which meant that when she pulled back, I fell. When she engaged, I steadied. I was entirely at the mercy of her emotional weather. With Soleil, something was fundamentally different. I was, for the first time in my adult romantic life, not waiting for her to make me okay. I was already okay, not perfect, not finished, not without tender places and residual fears, but okay, grounded, present in myself. And from that place, I could actually be with her, not cling to her, not perform for her, not manage her perception of me. Just be with her. Genuinely, imperfectly, actually. That is what healing made possible. Not the absence of difficulty, the ability to be present through it. There were things I had to work through. Even in the safety of this relationship, there were moments, early on, and then occasionally later, when she would go quiet for a day or two, focused on a project or working through something of her own, and the old fear would rise in me. The Deja fear. The she's pulling away, she's leaving. I'm too much. I'm not enough. Say something, fix it. Make her stay fear. I had to learn to sit with that fear without acting on it. To observe it. Oh, there you are. I know what you are. You're not the truth. And let it pass without letting it run me. The first time this happened, I didn't tell Soleil right away. I sat with it, journaled about it, talked to Dr. Webb about it. And then, when Soleil came back around, when the quiet passed naturally and she re-engaged, I told her. I said, I want you to know that when you went quiet this week, something in me got scared. It wasn't about you. It's a pattern I'm aware of. I just wanted to name it. She didn't apologize for needing her own space. She didn't panic at the fact that I had old wounds. She said, "Thank you for telling me. Do you want to tell me more about what that fear feels like?" And we talked about it, like adults. Like two people who had both done enough work to hold difficult things without dropping them. That conversation, that ordinary, imperfect, honest conversation, felt more intimate to me than anything that had happened in 6 years with Deja. Here is what I want to tell you about being in a relationship after you've rebuilt yourself. It's quieter than you think, not boring, present. There's a difference. The chaos of my relationship with Deja had felt, for a long time, like aliveness. The volatility, the uncertainty, the making up after the pulling away, it had felt like something was happening, like the intensity was proof of love. I had confused turbulence with depth. What I have with Soleil is deep in a way that doesn't announce itself. It's in the Sunday mornings when she makes coffee without asking how I take it because she already knows. It's in the way she noticed, 3 months into our relationship, that I had stopped writing, and asked, not with pressure, just with genuine curiosity, what was getting in the way. It's in the way she holds my hand at concerts, and then lets go when she wants to move, without making the releasing a thing. It's in the way she disagrees with me, clearly, directly, without cruelty, about small things and occasionally large ones, and the way we find our way through those disagreements to somewhere neither of us started. It's in the way she chooses me, actively, visibly, consistently, not dramatically. Just, I am in her life and she is in mine, and neither of us is pretending that isn't what this is. I had spent so many years loving in the absence of that. I had told myself that loving without being chosen was noble, was patient, was proof of how deeply I could feel. What I understand now is that loving without being chosen is, whatever else it is, not a relationship. It's a performance with an audience of one. And it is exhausting. And it costs things you don't fully know you're paying until they're gone. There are 3 things I know now that I didn't know before. I want to share them with you, because this is why I'm telling this story. Not for me. For the version of you that might be where I was. The first, you cannot love someone into choosing you. If someone is not choosing you, they are not choosing you, and no quantity of patience or accommodation or self-erasure will change that. The choosing has to come from them, and if it doesn't come, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is stop waiting for it. The second, being alone is not the worst thing. I say this as someone who spent 6 years in a half relationship, because the idea of not having her felt worse than the reality of not being fully had. The gap between those 2 fears is where I gave away years of my life. Being alone, actually alone, in the real sense, without the ghost of someone's almost commitment, gave me back to myself. It was hard. It was also the most essential work I have ever done. The third, real love, the kind that actually holds you, doesn't require you to perform. It doesn't require you to be the most impressive version of yourself at all times. It doesn't require you to manage your difficult emotions away before you're allowed to bring yourself to the table. Real love says, bring the hard parts too, I can hold those. Let me show you. I know that third one because Soleil lives it, not perfectly. Nobody lives anything perfectly. But she is consistent. She is honest. She shows up. And she has never, not once, made me feel like being fully myself was too much. Let me tell you about a moment that happened recently, because I want to end with something specific rather than general. It was an ordinary evening. We were in her apartment. She has a beautiful place in Andersonville, full of plants and books and a piano she plays with her eyes closed. And I was sitting on her couch reading while she practiced something. Not performing. Just playing through a piece she'd been working on, stopping and starting, correcting, finding the phrasing she was looking for. I wasn't watching her. I was reading. And then at some point I looked up, and she was playing something I hadn't heard before, something slow and searching and very beautiful. And the lamp was on, and the window was dark, and Billy was there on the arm of the couch, because Billy comes everywhere now, and I thought, I am here. I am fully here. I am a person who is here, not waiting for something to become real, not performing a version of myself that would keep someone nearby, not watching for signs that things were about to change, just present. In a room with another person, in a life I recognized as mine. I don't have words for what that is exactly. I've been trying to find them, but maybe it's just this. It's what it feels like when you come back to yourself, when you find the address you'd lost. When you walk in and it's you, the actual you, before all the accommodating and shrinking, and you think, there you are. I was looking for you. I want to talk to you now, directly. Not as the character in this story, but as the person who lived it and is choosing to share it. If you're listening to this and you recognize something in what I've described, the self-erasure, the waiting, the loving someone who never quite chose you back, I want you to hear this. It is not a personal failure. It is not evidence that you are too much or not enough or fundamentally difficult to love. It is evidence that you were doing what humans do, trying to make connection work, even under imperfect conditions, even at cost to yourself. And the fact that it cost you doesn't make you foolish. It makes you someone who loved as hard as they could with the tools they had. But you deserve more than that, not as a consolation, as a baseline. You deserve to be chosen, fully, visibly, consistently. Not as a performance or a grand gesture, but as a steady, ordinary, daily thing. You deserve someone who moves toward you when you slip, rather than taking a step back. You deserve someone who makes room for your difficult emotions, instead of tolerating them at a distance. You deserve someone who finds out how you take your coffee and remembers. You deserve to be present in your own life, not performing it, not managing it, actually in it, actually there, actually you. And if you're in the middle of the hard part right now, if you're in the part where you're rebuilding and it's slow and you're not sure anything is shifting, I promise you that something is shifting. Even if you can't feel it, the work counts even before the results arrive. The sitting with yourself counts, the naming things counts, the getting up and going to your corner booth and belonging to yourself for an hour. That counts. You are not behind. You are not too old, too broken, too much history. You are a person in the middle of becoming the version of yourself that is fully here. And that is not small. That is everything. If this story found you in a moment when you needed it, please subscribe. This channel exists for the stories that don't always get told, for the women who are learning to come back to themselves, for the love that is quiet and steady and real. We're building a community here, and I want you in it. Drop your city in the comments. Tell me what landed. Tell me what you're carrying. I read everything. And wherever you are, Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Oakland, London, Toronto, Sao Paulo, Lagos, you are not listening alone. We are all in this conversation together. My name is Renata. I am 41 years old. I live in Chicago. I love a woman named Soleil who fixed a printer and sat with me in a kitchen and moved toward me when I slipped. I lost myself for a long time. I found my way back. And the version of me that exists now, the one who is actually here, actually present, actually hers and mine, she was worth every painful step of the journey back. You are worth that journey too. I believe it completely. Thank you for being here. See you in the next story.